Welcome to Founder Stories. Today with me I have Matt MacInnis from Inkling. Welcome.
Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about Inkling.
Sure. Downtown San Francisco, 100 people, and to sum it up really shortly, we are the future of cloud publishing. If you think about how information and knowledge is curated and structured today and printed in books, a lot of that stuff's still done on paper, and we're making it happen in a digital context. And so you'll see great textbooks, adult learning, professional content, all kinds of stuff like that at inkling.com.
Now, what were you doing before Inkling, and how did you come up with the idea?
I was at Apple for almost 8 years and had worked in a number of different teams in the company and got really close to the education market, most recently kind of helping them run the business development programs globally. And I also knew a little bit about this really cool thing that was coming, which ultimately turned out to be the iPad. And I knew that that device was going to change the way people consumed content. And so I quit and started Inkling, and the rest is history.
One of the things that sometimes can be challenging is when you've been at a company for 8 years, unless one like Apple, and you leave that to go start a company. That some people make that transition easier than others. And I'd love to hear from you, like, what were some of the surprises when you went to start a company that
surprises,
you didn't anticipate?
They can be, surprises can come quickly, and they can also come really slowly. You can sort of realize that something that worked at a big company doesn't work at a little company. And I think if you actually look at the statistics, and again, I haven't done that, so this is sort of intuition, but you don't see a lot of successful startup CEOs coming out of Apple. And what I think I've learned in hindsight is that a lot of the methods that you apply in a company that has a tailwind, where the resources you've got are just sort of poured on, right? Because the model works, the products are successful, and in Apple's case, for example, being insanely secretive about what you're doing, that doesn't work. You know, nobody from Apple wants to come and talk about the next great thing they're building, but you've got to do that as a startup. And that's just, you know, sort of secretiveness versus being open, how you, what you expect of people internally, how you treat your engineering team, right? At Apple, you kind of are expected to sit down and do your work. And in a startup, there's so much more opportunity for innovation outside the box that you kind of want people to feel like they're unshackled from absolute constraints. And so I had a lot of lessons to learn when I came out of Apple about the operating system that we use inside Inkling, and had to build one for us that worked for us as opposed to what I was experiencing at Apple. You've got to be your own leader when you leave that big company and shed the things that need to be shed. You
raise a really interesting topic around transparency. I know when I was at Palm working with many ex-Apple folks, I think they brought a lot of that secrecy over. And you know, we kind of had to mediate that secrecy by being transparent to employees. Right. I mean, how have you kind of looked at transparency at Inkling, and how do you embody that or learned applying that?
You know, there's this huge privilege that I have. I mean, and this is what every founder CEO has and needs to use wisely when they start a company. You get to pick every single person that you work with, every single one. I mean, that's an insane privilege. And if you hire well, which is a whole other topic, then you can assume the intelligence and the loyalty and general trustworthiness of the people around you, because your well-being and your success as a CEO and a founder is totally dependent on the people that you hire, and they get that. It's symbiotic, right? And if you have that level of trust, not just with your executive team or whatever, and I don't know that this necessarily scales to 5,000, but I can speak from experience and say it works at the scale of 100. If you have that deep sense of trust and mutual respect, then you can be transparent. You can trust people with the good and the bad. It doesn't mean that you deliver data without context. You don't walk into a room of employees and say, you know, we just missed this goal, it's a disaster, and walk out of the room. You walk in and you say, here are the numbers, here's what went right, here's what went wrong, and here's what we're going to do about it. And you're explicit with everybody about it, then you can trust their intelligence to then be motivated by that knowledge and not panic or run out of the room screaming, looking for a new job, right? There's a way to trust the people you work with. But I think it starts with the quality of your hire and whether you're building a relationship with those people where you have that mutual trust.
Let's come back to hiring in a bit. When you were forming Inkling, how did you find your co-founders? I mean, it's a big topic, one that I run into all the time. I'm like, hey, I want to start a company, but I can't find that co-founder.
Right. This one kills me. This one kills me because I don't think you find a co-founder. You've got people who, and this comes back to trust again, and it also comes back to people with whom you have high bandwidth. You already know how to communicate with them. You know with the wink of an eye or a nope. that they're going to get the message and they're not going to be offended. You don't have to learn the dynamic between those two people because they've already known each other. Those are the people you want to start a company with. And it's not to say that if you're looking to start a company and you don't have somebody like that in your back pocket, that you can't start the company, but it may be the right thing to do to go start it on your own and go at it and find people you can work with in the course of business. My experience with my co-founders is, it's kind of a fairy tale, honestly. One of them I knew from YMCA camp when we were 15 years old, and even then in our teenage years said, dude, we should do a company together. And another I met very early on in college. I was the president of the school newspaper, and he kind of did all the IT stuff. And so when I quit on my own, and I started the company sort of on my own, if you want to call it that. But I immediately reached out to these guys and said, hey, I'm doing this. Do you guys want to come join the party? One dropped out of his PhD program. One dropped out of his master's program in London. Both moved out to San Francisco, and it worked. And I'll make one other comment about the co-founder thing. Having 3 people start a company, although it's more expensive from an equity perspective, is awesome. Because when there's 2 people, you can have that sort of bilateral disagreement, and it becomes a problem at times. 3 people can always convince, 2 guys can always convince the third that something's not right or something isn't working, and they'll generally roll with it. And it makes for a really nice balance. So the 3 of us, I hear all kinds of stories about co-founders breaking up and things not working out. Times are good at Inkling right now. We've had our bumps along the way, but the 3 of us have stayed together because we balance one another out, and that's been awesome.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, someone breaks the tie.
Yeah, there's always a tiebreaker.
One of the things that we were talking about before we started here on the show was around just hiring, which is a big topic. And you mentioned the concept that you developed around values-based hiring.
Right.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so a person is a multifaceted entity, right? They have skills, they have preferences, and one of the things that they have is values. And people ask me what the culture is at Inkling, and I say, well, I don't think that you can describe a culture directly any more than you can describe dark matter, because culture is an operating system. It's the things that people do and don't do in the company instinctively in response to what they observe other people doing. And you build culture by encouraging and discouraging certain behaviors, and you typically encourage and discourage behaviors on the basis of your values. And that's why you see a company take a certain form, take a certain shape that really centers around the founders, because those initial encouraging and discouraging decisions are made around the values of the founders. And so if you do a good job, you hire people who have the same foundation that you do. You hire people with a common value set. To make it really specific, at Inkling, we hire for people who make thoughtful decisions. And that is often at odds with making quick decisions. And you have to be really careful, because you don't want an extreme in either case. Overthinking is bad, not thinking is bad. But I think there are companies in the Valley, very well-known companies, that have been wildly successful and are not known for thoughtful decision-making. They are known for pew-pew, right? Just go, do it, build it, bang.
Yeah,
and
fire, ready, aim.
Right, fire, ready, aim, which is a valid approach. Values are usually not good or bad. They just are or are not. And in our case, we are thoughtful, and we hire for that value. People who instinctively want to think about something before they decide. And then we try to counterbalance that with the downside.
So does that literally get embodied in the interview process, where you look at how long someone thinks through, let's say, a design problem or a CS problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we do, so the way that we interview is we bring people in, we run them through an afternoon, and they get to meet lots of people along the way. And of course, we do heavy skills-based interviewing. You got to make sure that they're capable from a job perspective. But then we interview at the very end for values, and they're a little tired, and we get to see them answer some pretty tough questions about how they deal with conflict, how they deal with problems. We walk them through their own professional or academic history, and you can just tell. You can see in somebody what their sort of instinctive reaction is to a tough situation. There's a lot to do with body language, a lot to do with the metadata about the answers that you get, but really what you're interviewing for is consistency of values with what we try to bring into the company. And I think we've done a pretty good job.
Now, as being a CEO of a company that's a little bit over north of 100 folks, what kind of metrics or tools do you use to kind of understand to make sure that the company's driving in the direction that's consistent with your vision?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something that you learn over and over and over again as a CEO, because as the company grows, it's this one. How do you keep people aligned around a common direction? And I tell you, it gets harder and harder as you go. At the beginning, when there's 5 of you, you are literally in the same room and everyone hears everything, and so you're automatically all on the same page. When you get to 15 or 20 people, most people hear everything, and there's communication that has to happen, but you can kind of handle it with email, you can handle it with meetings, like things just happen. People understand how to get from point A to point B, and most importantly, understand what point B is. When you're 100 people, it just doesn't work that way. I have managers, and the managers have employees, and it doesn't feel like a big company, but you've got to put in formal procedures to make sure that folks understand what the strategy is. So we've actually rolled out a system very similar to what Google uses, objectives and key results, talking about here's what we're going to try and get done in the next 12 weeks as a team, here's how it's going to add up team by team into the big outcomes we're trying to achieve as a company. And what I have to make sure of is that we're driving toward just a really small number of important metrics that everybody gets and can aim toward. So, you know, what that method, that won't work again either. And I have this concept with CEOs that I work with who are maybe a few years behind me in building their companies called the fog bank, which is something you drive into as you are building your company. You're driving down the road, you've got these lines on either side, and you know what you're doing. You got to keep the car between the white lines. And then you drive into a fog bank and you can't see a bloody thing for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. And that's because the situation and what the business demands of you has changed. And you got to figure it out, putting one foot in front of another until you realize, oh, okay, so it's no longer about getting in a room and looking at product designs. Now it's actually about driving partnerships because the team has the design work covered. And this is a progress thing that you go through, including what you asked me, which is how do you manage across a big group of people? You got to figure it out as you go.
I really like that analogy of a fog bank. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, having been there, I mean, there's times where you know this is the right direction, but you can't really see what's on the other side or when it actually clears up.
And the third time you hit it.
In that fog bank, and if the employees sense that, hey, wow, we are in a fog bank, what have you found to be effective from a leadership perspective to help calm the troops, if you will?
Right. You tell them that you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing inspires confidence. Well, and again, for me, looking at people that I have looked up to as leaders and then me acting as one, nothing inspires confidence more than honesty, right? And that's what builds trust. And trust buys you a lot of room. If your team trusts you and you need some time to figure something out, they'll say, you know what, he's got it. And I'm going to keep doing what I got to do, and we'll hear more in a bit. And that's what happens once in a while, right? You have to get up in front of the team and say, this works, this hasn't, not sure what to do yet, we're working on it, we got it, don't worry about it. But you're transparent, and I think honesty is an awfully important policy, especially in early companies, because shit happens, right?
Yeah, completely agree. And I mean, it's never a straight line to.
And if you cover it, the converse here is if you cover it up, oh man, people can smell that.
Oh, yeah, from a mile away.
Don't even try. Yeah. But you've got to, if you're a good leader, you'll know what to say.
Matt, thanks so much for coming on Founder Stories.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.